Chow is a person with an elegant and polite appearance, but he is a pervert who kills people continuously. Needing the nightmares of many women in the city, he used the most brutal tricks to kill the girls he liked. Chow will blatantly enter the house of the target he has chosen, first open a bottle of beer and eat some food to stop being bored. Next, he lay on the victim's bed eating apples and reading the newspaper. In the newspaper reporting on the largest serial murder in the past 2 years, he used a special trick to murder 4 beautiful young girls. Next, Chow very gently stroked the cat, waiting for the target to finish bathing and go out. Who are you? Chow likes to kill people, but he loves cats very much. After doing everything, he cleaned the victim's house very cleanly, erasing all traces of himself. The car he drove to here was a stolen car, so he had to clean it up, and finally, he handily cut off a beautiful rose as a reward for himself. The reason why Chow killed the woman just now is extremely simple. When he went to the supermarket, he saw her smiling at him, but he didn't expect her to smile at the person behind him, not him. Even so, Chow was also attracted by that smile. The woman I like can only kill people, not let her be with others. When Chow came home to listen to his mother's voice message, his joy immediately stopped here. He has a mother who has an extremely strong desire to control her children. Moreover, she is harsh and talkative. He could only pour out his hatred for his mother on other women. This is also the main reason why Chow harms women. Chow is just an ordinary person. He will not do it because of nonsense or incitement to murder. Only kill people according to their preferences. He liked women, and even more liked to do things that those women didn't like for themselves. He likes to take a briefcase with him for a walk or on the bus. In this way, it is convenient for him to find his next lover. Because of her mother's constant urging, Chow could only reluctantly go to her house to eat. Before entering the house, he threw the beer bottle he had drunk at the victim's house into the trash. Then, through the beam of the car lock, he stole into it. After erasing all the residences, he entered the house. Mother saw that Chow didn't have a slap on the forehead. This was his mother's way of education. As long as she was a little dissatisfied, she would hit him at the same time. Chow could only smile wryly and give the rose that had just been cut off to her mother. Seeing his mother being stabbed by the thorns of the flower, he felt much more comfortable in his heart. Then he gave his mother the bag of apples that he liked to eat the most, and at this time she was angry and let him into the house. But the dish my mother-in-law cooked was both cold and difficult to eat, and even the stick didn't like the smell. Her purpose was to call him home for dinner, except to bring him out for a fight, but also to ask for his money. The bride was also forced to show great enjoyment. The bride's revenge took away a piece of her painting. Letting her put this picture together for the rest of her life is not enough for her to die. On TV reporting on the murder, this serial killer has already killed 6 women. The bride looked at her masterpiece with great satisfaction. The number of people who heard him kill was not only 6 people. There were several more people rotting in the trunk of the car, but the police did not find out. The police received a call to report the crime immediately to the scene. The whole person in the cage was tied to the bed. The cat's tail that she raised was also neatly placed next to it. The victim's body was stuffed with a neatly gnawed apple pulp. The cause of her death was because she was overwhelmed by the apple pulp. Every time she kills, the bride uses weapons and different things, but the only thing they have in common is that they put apple pulp in the victim's neck. Such a peculiar and overbearing way of killing made him get a nameplate for the police to put up. That's the Christchurch cover. Like this time, the bride didn't just kill one person. The police in the trunk of the car parked in front of the door also found the body of an old woman. This old woman was the owner of the car. The daughter-in-law shot her dead and then stole her car. Before that, the victim died from being beaten, stabbed, and overwhelmed. Now that the bride has more guns, his crime tricks are being upgraded day by day. Strawberries, like most other men, love to look at girls. In his eyes, each woman has her own beauty. While enjoying the beauty, he also began to look for the next target. The perverted killer also has his love. The bride has been paying attention to the flower seller for a few months now. She is beautiful and honest. She laughed and looked like an angel that made her heart melt. Every day, The bride sits silently and looks at the other person. The bride watched her, observed her life. In his heart, the two of them already had a narrow beginning. The bride wants to know if she lives alone. Do you like cats? Can she take care of herself? The only way to answer these questions is to sneak into her house. The beautiful flower girl was named Laura, and she lived alone. The next step is to get to know her while building a close friendship. The bride's way of killing is so special. Why haven't the police caught him yet? Because he also works as a cleaner at the police station. After the bride killed the first victim, he also felt tense. He then killed the janitor at the police station and killed the enemy's place. This is the man who was killed by his daughter-in-law. The police will never pay attention to a janitor with a child, under the pretext of cleaning to enter and exit the meeting room at will. Every step of the police's response he heard very clearly. As much as the police knew about him, the police had grasped all the clues and evidence. He knew everything. Then he would fill those pink holes again. So 2 years ago, the police still did not investigate anything. Now the police have only one clue. The family member of the car owner said that the car department is attached to a special department marker. But the police could not have suspected that it had been thrown into a trash can a few tens of kilometers away. The autopsy report showed that the young girl died of suffocation, showing no signs of abuse. The axis in the ship's core destroyed the DNA, so there were no other clues. After all, this is an abandoned case. Another janitor at the police station, Sally, is very fond of Joe. But she wasn't Joe's ideal role model. Every day, Sally brought toys to play with Joe. She was an extremely honest girl. But in Joe's heart, there was already a flower girl rushing out. Soon after, Joe went to the police station to work as usual and suddenly found that all the police officers were in the classroom discussing something tensely. He left on the ventilation door to eavesdrop on the conversation of the police. Just now, a girl named Daniela was murdered. She was strangled to death at the scene of the attack, leaving behind an apple. At the crime scene, the investigation team only found the fingerprints and DNA of the victim's husband. Stoddard School police believe the iconic apple belonged to Chris Churchkiver. Joe immediately came out annoyed when he heard it. Obviously, he didn't know Daniela, but now he was the one who was convicted. Didn't the police realize that someone was imitating him? Joe is furious and decides to find the villain to prove his book. When Joe entered the meeting room to clean up his trophy-filled cockroach room, it was not forbidden for Daniela not to do it. Joe saw on the table that Daniela's case memoir was about to be mixed in for research. At this moment, Sheriff Stoddard walked in. He wiped the table and eavesdropped on Stoddard's conversation with the police officer. The police have ruled out the murder of Daniela's husband. Rebecca said that this time the enemy didn't eat apples, was someone simulating Christchurch or something like that. But they didn't find a clue that was still a headache with the case. It seemed that he could only find the enemy by himself in the early days. Joe studied it carefully, and the photos of the scene did not find anything. It seemed that only entering Daniela's house could find a clue. But the crime scene was temporarily cordoned off by the police, and Joe couldn't get inside. Joe's mother kept calling him home to eat. The rice was still a half-cooked piece of meat left in the refrigerator. It is still the words of reduction and constant demand for money. There was no other way. He could only endure. She lamented that her collage was missing a piece to finish it. She also rummaged through the trash. As a result, a beam of car locks was discovered, and she was preparing to hand it over to the police. As soon as Joe looked at it, he realized that this was the lock beam of the car he had killed and robbed. Jiang told the police that he would be in great trouble. He lied that this was the lock of the office car. He accidentally dropped it here. Joe's mother sneered again, and it was very difficult for him to regain the key. Joe thoroughly cleaned the lock beam, wiped off all traces of oil, and then put it in a plastic bag. But he was still uneasy about his mother. Joe hesitated for a moment, then took out a box of rat poison and made his mother a cup of coffee with special ingredients. Joe smiled and brought coffee to his mother. Although the coffee was very bitter, she still drank it all. There are no more cold changes, no more urgent calls. A world without mothers is really beautiful. Joe was secretly glad to get the bus home, and on the way he picked up an injured cat. As a person with a shallow love for humanity, he immediately took the cat to the veterinarian. The beautiful nurse immediately operated on the cat because the cat had to be hospitalized, so she and Joe exchanged contact methods. Joe looked at the nurse and smiled a little wrongly. He came up with the intention of killing, wanted to keep her by his side forever. After that, Joe went to the supermarket to buy cat food. The cashier only focused on playing games and didn't pay attention to him. Joe came up with the intention to kill again. Not a person like this. He can also break the rules to kill men. She stood in line behind the security guard and enthusiastically introduced cat food to Joe. She is also a cat lover. Joe has a passion, especially for girls who have cats. At this moment, he was trembling again and wanted to kill people. A girl like this can only be by his side forever. Her name is Melissa, and she and Joe happened to be on the same hit line. The more the two talked, the closer they became. It felt like they had known each other for a long time. Melissa introduced herself as a reporter near Joe, who talked about her aunt working in the police station. Melissa curiously began to talk about the famous Lean Hoa murder case in recent times. The two got into the car and talked about injections, as if she knew a lot about this intercultural murder. When she arrived at the station and told her to pay attention to safety, Melissa decisively asked Joe to take her home, by the way, to drink a cup of coffee and wait for the cold. Joe took off his jacket and put it on Melissa, but something was in her pocket. Joe shyly pulled out the gun, which was something the police had to bring with her, who told her not to pay attention. Melissa doesn't care too much. She leads Joe down a broken road to take a shortcut home. After walking for a while, Melissa took the initiative to put her arm around Joe, conveniently pulling out the gun that was very close to his waist. Melissa grabbed a gun and forced Joe to open the bag he was carrying, which contained apples, duct tape, knives, and screws. This is a characteristic sign of a murder. Joe explained that this was the crime tool of the killer, who had just been found by the police. But Melissa didn't believe it and forced Joe to take off his pants and panties. Since Melissa still had a gun in her hand, he could only obediently comply. Melissa knew what kind of person he was, and Melissa took out a set of handcuffs and threw them at him. Melissa looked at the tools in Joe's briefcase and felt extremely excited. She didn't bother to listen to Joe's mouth and immediately sat on him. Later, Melissa gags Joe with a gun and forces him to admit that he is Chris Churchcover. Melissa studied his crime tool and talked about him. She saw him peeking at Daniela's house and frantically guessed that he was the serial killer. Melissa thinks that Joe was the one who killed Daniela. After speaking, Melissa took out a needle aimed at Joe's egg and cut it once. When Joe woke up, it was already morning, and the demon that made countless girls who had just heard this terrified name was tortured by a woman. Not only was Joe crushed the egg, but his watch was also stolen by a wanderer. The crime tools were also taken away by Melissa. Joe's heart was filled with hatred, and he vowed to chop Melissa into 100 pieces. He tried to go home, but did not dare to call the police. He couldn't go to the hospital, but he could ask for help from Sally, who had a crush on him. Receiving the call, Sally immediately went to Joe's house. He resolutely refused to let her call the doctor to treat herself. And Melissa only crushed an egg. He was still able to maintain the seed. Sally had studied nursing, so she sewed and gave first aid to Joe. Sally was an honest girl, and after taking care of Joe, she even helped him clean the house. She saw everywhere in the house were newspapers reporting on the Christchurch cover and pictures of Daniela's crime scene. Although she was very curious, she didn't ask anything and quietly left. 2 days later, Joe woke up to the terrible pain from the wound that had made him forget who had saved him. It could be Melissa, it could also be Sally. He saw that the house was cleaned up, the pictures of the murder were neatly arranged. Immediately had a bad premonition. Maybe the person who took care of him had already reported it to the police. He tried to endure the pain, packed up his things to run away, and suddenly there was a knock on the door. Not the police. Joe tried to climb through the window to escape, but the school was still in pain, making it impossible for him to hang up. There was no other way. Joe just opened the door. There was no one outside. And it was a phone, and then his crime tool. Joe knew this was sent by Melissa. She knew everything about him. Obviously, she could have sent it to the police station, but she sent it to him. It was clear that Melissa was trying to intimidate Joe into working for her. Joe looked at the necklace and knew that Sally was a savior, but she had discovered his secret, so he had to find her. Although Joe took small steps, his eggs still hurt, and he slid one step at a time to the bus stop until it was time for the police to work. On the way, he saw the flower girl rushing out, but if he wanted to have intimate contact with her, he would probably have to wait a little longer. Joe was still worried about Sally telling the sheriff about his story, but Strutter didn't know anything. Strutter told Joe that Sally's father was sick, so she took a leave of absence at home to take care of him, so he was relieved. After work, Joe goes to Sally's house to prepare to deal with the aftermath. Just as he was about to knock on the door of the house, just as Sally came back from outside, old Joe had just come to thank him for coming into Sally's house. Joe said that he was robbed that night, so he was injured, and the stupid girl Sally also advised him to call the police and rest quickly. But Sally couldn't understand why there were so many articles about Christopher and photos of the crime scene in Joe's house. At this time, Joe had already pulled out his knife. With his current state, if he stabbed directly, he would not be able to defeat Sally. He only lied that he was helping the police chief investigate a new case, stealing files to study. Once a daughter loves intelligence, she believes Joe's lie and says she will never tell anyone. Hearing that, Joe put away the knife. Now if he kills Sally, he will lose someone to give him credit. Just like that, Sally innocently escaped for a lifetime. Joe received a phone call from Melissa. She was extremely excited about a serial killer like him, wanting to learn more about him. Now she also believes that Joe didn't kill Daniela, but someone else. So she destroyed the knife, avoiding the first task, which was to break into Daniela's house and investigate the person who had impersonated him. When he got home, Joe suddenly received a phone call from his mother, who was not dead but had severe diarrhea. After hearing this, Joe was extremely regretful. He gave up 2 little rat poisons so many times. Why must he give more? The next morning, Joe returned to the police station to work. Today, his most important task was to keep an eye on the progress of Daniela's investigation of the case. He tried to endure the pain, climbed up the ventilation pipe, eavesdropping on the conversation of the police. Daniela's husband's alibi marriage presentation was not recognized. At the time of the incident, the opponent admitted that he was at the football field watching the match. But someone proves that most of the time Daniela's husband is in the car sending emails. The alibi car was parked because of everyone's observation. Moreover, it was very close to home. Daniela's husband had time to kill his wife and then return to the football field. In the evening, Joe went to Daniela's house, and the police lifted the blockade. He easily opened the door to enter the house. He pulled the beam back and sat on the victim's couch drinking beer. The investigation process is still long. Just take a nap first. At the same time, the police interrogated Daniela's husband based on the forensic report. Daniela's husband has a very serious history of domestic violence. Therefore, he had a motive to kill his wife. But Daniela's husband insisted that he did not kill, definitely caused by Christopher. On this side, Joe fell asleep and began to recreate the crime scene. He placed all the items in the exact location that the police photographed for evidence, using the mindset of one murderer to guess the psychology of another murder. After a piece of armor, he discovered something suspicious. The ballpoint pen in the picture and the ballpoint pen in the victim's house are not the same one. At that time, Daniela was playing for the young hero to fill in. Instinctively, she took out the pen in her hand to protect herself. The hero snatched the pen and threw it away, and the pen was thrown out and swept against the wall. There may also be fingerprints of the hero. So, who can replace the victim's old pen at the time of the photo shoot? There is only one person who can enter the crime scene. It also means that the hero killed Daniela. The impersonator Joe is a policeman. Just at this moment, the light outside the door came on, and someone came. Joe hurriedly turned off the electricity in the house and hid aside. In addition, the person who came here was the Strader police chief. Wanting this, did he still come here to get his beer pen back? Could it be that the sheriff is the mock Joe? Strader saw the unfinished beer bottle on the bedside and immediately became suspicious. He went to the toilet to check. Joe is also ready to fight. At this moment, the policewoman called the other party. Still thinks that Daniela's husband is a hero. That phone call made Strader not look for it anymore and rushed back to the police station. Joe held the beer bottle and watched the Strader leave. On the night of Daniela's death, there were many police officers at the crime scene. Joe wanted to let the simulator know that his behavior had been known to Christopher. Thus, the opponent will be afraid and wade out of the loophole. Joe left Daniela's house, but went to Laura's house instead of his own, the beautiful flower seller. He didn't want to end his beautiful love so soon. But catching the simulator to ensure his own safety made him more excited. Now he needed to kill Laura to help and improve his sense of happiness. He pried the door into the house first, opened the refrigerator, and took another long bottle of beer. Laura was very attentive, and there was an apple on the table that he liked. Based on what Joe had observed over a long period of time, Laura was definitely taking a shower right now. He sat on the bed eating apples, thinking that killing Laura might lure the model to appear. He should kill her here, and then throw the body at Daniela's house or tie her up and bring her to Daniela's house before killing her. Joe sat silently at the bathroom door and waited for Laura to come out. At this time, the door opened, but the person who came out was a man. Joe threw the beer bottle at the man's head, then took the opportunity to run away. At this time, his egg was still very painful, and it was impossible to fight back against the other man. Joe had just run outside when he saw the police here. It seemed that they had discovered the car that he had mixed up. There was a police officer in front and someone chasing after him. Joe only managed to hide in the back of a car. When the other party went to report to the police, Joe ran away from here in small steps. Fortunately, he was used to the terrain of this place and was not arrested by the police. Joe was struggling to run away when a car suddenly braked right in front of him. The person who came was the lovely Melissa. Melissa doesn't let Joe get into the car and makes him hide in the trunk. In the sound of enthusiastic music, Melissa drove away. Joe was in pain and wanted to die, thinking that he had broken the other egg. The police company arrived at Laura's house, and the colonel was found half dead on the head of the bed. Although DNA skin testing is not possible, it can be compared to Christopher's previous bite. The other man was Laura's friend. Laura was traveling in Bali, so she gave birth to him temporarily at her house. Because he was so frightened at that time, he couldn't see Christopher's face clearly. The other party can only be described as a white man with a mid-range figure and a baseball cap. Melissa takes Joe to Bobnath's previous place before him. This place has the most painful memory of Joe's life. Joe tells Melissa that the murderer who caught him before him is most likely a policeman. After hearing this, Melissa was extremely excited, so it was worth challenging first. Unexpectedly, except for the two perverts, Melissa and Joe, there is also a third person. She asked Joe to find this person within 24 hours. Otherwise, she will send all the evidence to the police. Laura said that her sudden interest in traveling also meant that Christopher was a decent police officer. He didn't have time to watch Laura all day, so he didn't know she was at the airport. Laura's friend recalled a very important clue. Christopher brought a briefcase. Joe immediately hid his briefcase when he heard it. But then thinking about it, everyone knew that he carried his bag to work, and suddenly he didn't carry it anymore, which would make people suspicious. While Joe was cleaning up, Laura's friend went to the police station to assist in the investigation. Joe hurriedly sat down so that the other party could not see him. All of this was caused by Melissa. Joe was going to use the police department's computer to investigate Melissa's true identity. But no matter how he searched, he couldn't find it. The police thought he was using his computer to watch adult movies, so he didn't pay attention. Joe saw that every cop looked like a cop who simulated him. He only had 24 hours and tried to take advantage of the time. When the police went to do the mandatory duty of attendance at the scene, Joe accepts to bring coffee to Schroeder for a peek. But the policewoman suddenly came in and checked Daniela's husband's phone. During the time he watched the match, he was indeed at the car transfer lot and did not go anywhere. Once again, Daniela's husband was eliminated on suspicion of murder. Joe admitted that when Schroeder was leaving, he quickly stole a police roll call signature. Joe wanted to make a photocopy, but he didn't know how to use a photocopier. Sally kindly tried to help him, but was scolded by him during a fight. Sally thought that the rupture of her luck was unraveling, only to make Joe's emotions unstable. She was scolded by Joe, heartbroken, and left. Joe tries to recall the scene where the police check out the unsuspecting cops one by one. First, you can eliminate the photographer, because the opponent will not take pictures of the bad field against you. Next to the elimination of tattoos, even the greedy Lemko is breathing noisily. He has no killing ability. A police officer with a broken arm cannot kill a person and can be eliminated. Then there were only 3 people left, including Sheriff Schroeder. Schroeder has always assumed that Daniela's husband is the perpetrator and could also be a model. So there are only 2 more suspects. Joe broke into the file room to search for the files of the other 2 policemen. One of them, Brian and Robert, hoped that the 2 of them would not be home tonight. Joe would break into their home looking for evidence. Joe overheard Brian's conversation, knowing he had an appointment tonight. So, tonight, he will start at Brian's house first. Joe listens to the phone and finally decides to spy on Brian to see what he does. He watched Brian see the other party sneaking around in front of the door of a building. It seemed to be watching for something. Joe argued at the door and went into the house, took a knife from his leather bag, and went everywhere looking for him. In the room where the sound came out, Joe carefully approached it. When he opened the door, he saw a scene that burned his eyes. Unexpectedly, Brian fell in love with a gay man, so he could get rid of Brian's suspicions. Gay lovers will not be interested in women. In the evening, Joe told Melissa about his discovery. While talking about the movie, he wanted to ask for information about her identity, along with why she was so eager to find someone who imitated him. But Melissa didn't catch the trap. She pointed out the fear of opening up in Joe's delusion. Women once conceived will be very scary. So, Rebecca could also be an imitator. Although Brian likes boys, that doesn't mean he doesn't like girls. Maybe Joe is preying on the case for Daniela's husband to steal and scream. Robert has not yet been removed from the suspect list. Because the case was so difficult, Melissa gave Joe 24 hours. Joe hated Melissa deeply, but he couldn't do anything. He decided to go find a certain woman to kill to relieve his emotions. Ordinary women were now wary of the perverted murderer who was him. Joe quickly finds a girl standing on the street. He took her to Daniela's house and saw the villa the girl thought she was with the wrestling guest. But soon the girl regretted it. Joe opened the lid of the file to reveal all the weapons inside. The village girl just saw the tool and realized that she had boarded the enemy boat. She quickly searched her pocket for a leather tear gas spray, but was knocked out by Joe. He then strangled the girl to death. Joe felt much more comfortable now. He then drags the girl into the arson's trunk and falls out of Daniela's house. The police received a report that the girl's body was found burned in the trunk of the car. After a forensic examination, it was concluded that she was strangled to death and then burned. The plot of the case is like silk and makes the police very headache. One check Christopher no crime on the working day. As long as they choose weekends to commit crimes, their rest time is taken up by him. During this case analysis meeting, Joe did not receive any useful information. He continued his cleaning work. The girls who were colleagues of the village girl were invited to the station to assist in the investigation. The drawing passed by. Joe completely ignored him as an invisible person. A beautiful village girl named Becky didn't expect to be familiar with Strider. She also took the initiative to interrogate him. Strider also chatted with Becky. Seeing the scene, Joe immediately suspected how a police chief could get to know the village girl. Could Strider really be an imitator? So Joe decided to go to Becky and ask what was wrong. This time he didn't bring his tool briefcase. His current status was just an ordinary customer. Joe steals a car to a place where the village girls hang out. Very quickly, he found Becky. Joe immediately offered 100 New Zealand dollars, which made her dizzy. This is a very high price. But Joe didn't know that the police had already sent people to watch these girls. Sam Tianquan took a picture and recognized Joe as soon as he looked at it. Normally, this kid was very secretive, like an invisible person. I didn't expect him to be such a gambler. No wonder he didn't like Sally. Sam saw that this was not normal and went to call to report about Strider. Suddenly, someone knocked on his car window. He turned his head and saw a beautiful blonde girl. "Can you help me with something?" Joe and Becky go to a motel. Today, Joe didn't want to kill people, he just wanted to find some termites. He wanted to talk to Becky, not do anything else. Becky understands that there are many customers who come to them. It was only to tell how unhappy their marriage was, so they had an affair. Becky listens so much that she was about to become a psychiatrist. Joe asks Becky if her client has police. In order to give her a lot of money, she said that the police often came to look for her, although they did not specify their identities nor their names. But working like they can smell the smell of the police kilometers away. Moreover, those cops are all very rude and marginal, because they knew that even if they played chess, it wouldn't matter. But Strider had never been her guest, only helped her once. Joe knew he had misunderstood Strider. He wasn't really a model. Becky said there was a very perverted cop who liked to play with a female partner. Watching it again made her suffocate. Joe offered a little more money for Becky to describe the cop. He was a white man about 30 years old, with dark hair and blue eyes. Becky couldn't provide any more information. The two of them got into Joe's car and were about to take her home, when a car suddenly followed them. Joe took Becky home, and Becky said she could talk to the motel manager. That motel is full of industry packages, so you might know something. Joe looked at Becky's back and thanked her for her help. But Becky saw his face. In order not to reveal his whereabouts that he had not been able to kill Becky, Joe opened the door and got out of the car. "Becky, there's one more thing." Joe wants to put Becky in the trunk of the car, but as soon as he opens it, he finds Sam's body in it. The car lights came on, and the person who followed Joe and killed Sam was Melissa. She didn't say anything and drove away. One perverted fairy committed the crime. Another perverted fairy stood behind the guard. It was really very safe. But Joe also knew that this time it was big, and the death of the cop was a big nuisance. Joe resented Melissa for causing trouble, and Melissa said that she did it to deal with Zhang Ju for him. The picture of Joe and Becky trading together has been destroyed. Now they are a group. Melissa kills. Joe handles the corpse with a good fit, so what's left? Joe wanted to dispose of the body in a place where no one would find him, but now the car ran out of gas. After this incident, he also learned a new thing, which is that when a car thief has to look at the gas meter. He tried his best to push the car to change the gas in his heart, hating Melissa immensely. Originally, it was very troublesome to deal with one corpse, but now it has to deal with two. Don't you know that Sam is as heavy as an elephant? It was difficult for him to push the car to the gas station, but he accidentally ran into his father's friend. Joe just hoped that the other party would quickly leave. But at this moment, another police car arrived. Joe looked at the gas station's clock as hot as a fire, and the old man was beside it incessantly. The gas station and the car looked at him from time to time. After waiting for a few teeth to fill, the old man saw blood on the bones of the 6 cars. Fortunately, the old man with poor eyes thought that the car was not parked. Joe hurriedly put the accelerator foot away from the gas station. Joe didn't ask for his name. He was loving. He wasn't in a hurry to deal with the gas station, but went to the veterinary hospital to return the injured cat. On the way, he also turned off Melissa's phone. But he didn't know that this action would bring him a lot of great calculations. Joe stopped the car and left the cat home, then took a shovel at home to prepare for the slaughter. But as soon as he went outside, he found that the car he stole had been stolen by someone. He hurriedly called Melissa on the phone, but the other party turned off the phone. Joe guessed that the evil Melissa was trying to play him a trick. In case of uncertainty, he could only sleep overnight in the park. Melissa called again to remind her. Do not turn off the phone of a small woman. Melissa told her to take the card and told Joe to go to the police station. But today is Saturday as a holiday. Forced by Melissa, Joe could only agree. After all, He was an invisible person, and the police wouldn't pay attention to him. Joe had just called the police and saw a lot of police rushing to go on duty. Joe knew something big was going on. Melissa deserves to die, if she doesn't know. The car carrying the corpse was thrown in front of the Stoddard police chief's house. It is indeed a blatant provocation to the police force. The mother who hid the problem on the car was handled very cleanly by Melissa. No one saw who the person who parked the car here was. Sam and Becky's cards were in the trunk of a police camera that was smashed into a joke. Becky and Stoddard knew each other, and the exam card was thrown at his door. What information is the hero trying to convey? At this time, Rebecca received a phone call from the police department. The police department found a witness. He didn't know what was going on, but when the police department didn't pass, he started stealing pictures of the police. I don't know when these things can be used. Hiding Robert's locker, he found that the other party had been in the hotel recently. Obviously, the couple had a disagreement, so they were kicked out of the house. Hiding and stealing pictures of the other party and his wife. Before the police returned, he hid all the traces. Hiding happily talking to Sally, he suddenly saw an acquaintance. Isn't it Melissa? What did she do when she came to the police station in a decent dress? Hidden so scared that his heart wanted to jump out. Sally found it unusual, and she told her that the police had discovered the body. And the woman just now was a witness who saw the perpetrator. She was providing information to the police and drawing a picture of the perpetrator. Hidden so scared that he couldn't breathe. Does this crazy woman hold him up? What did she do this for? Hyde hurriedly ran to the police depot, and even his uniform could not be changed in time. As soon as he got on the bus, Melissa got on with him. She was so angry that she wanted to put her tool bag in her mouth, causing her to suffocate. Melissa gave the description and drawing of the perpetrator to Hyde that it was another man. Melissa said this was her first boyfriend. As long as someone betrays her, she will ruin the other party. By the way, deceiving the direction of the police's investigation, prolonging the time to help Hyde and find the imitator. This is a woman who is both crazy and scary. Hide it from yourself in the future. You must not provoke her. At the same time, the police also found Sam's car. Investigators from hiding the victim's tracks in his car. It was then loaded into another car and thrown in front of Straddle's house. The perpetrator was either because he was too confident or because he was crazy. Even though they knew it well, the police still had no clues now. Melissa pretended to be a police officer and went to the motel where the chalk merchants usually worked. She gave the manager some money and asked the police who was in the motel with Becky. The police came to investigate really attractively. The manager just looked at it and realized that Melissa was not an ordinary policeman. She asked for another 100 to speak. When she brought the third 100 bill, the new manager said that she had met the police and liked to play with female partners. When he received the fourth 100 bill, the manager began to point out the person. She looked at the photos stolen from the police station. When she received the fifth 100 bill, she pointed it out to the police. On the other hand, his life was not satisfactory at all. His mother suddenly invited the old man he met to come home to eat. It's hard to get rid of the two of you. When he got home, he suddenly found that his beloved golden dumpling owner had been played with by a wild cat to death. Hyde angrily took the cat out. Coincidentally, at this time, the hospital called and said that they had found the cat's owner. The other party is willing to pay all the costs to pick up the cat. Unable to suppress his anger anymore, he said to the nurse. That cat was hit by a car again, and after speaking, he smashed the phone. He was venting his mother's anger. Angry because of the injustices he suffered when he was a child. Still unable to pronounce the sentence, his superiors sent Stephen down to supervise the investigation process. The department reassigns tasks to all police officers who are obliged to speed up the case. Hiding the two goldfish, the two of you died because of the wild cat. For the sake of my mother, Melissa, and the assassin who mocked me, I'm going to be conservative for you. Rest in peace. Melissa felt that hiding her sadness didn't make it difficult for him. She said she hid that the motel manager identified the police officer as Robert. In the past time, hiding has not been used to investigate Robert. So he had to confirm if Robert was really his imitator. He went up and hid outside the hotel where Robert was staying to watch over him. But he didn't expect Robert to suddenly appear behind him. Robert asked why he was following him. Hid only told Robert, and when he looked at it, he knew that he was a civilized person. He wanted to ask Robert to make sure he was promoted. But Robert didn't believe his nonsense. It's true that the pond is torn, the eggs have been broken, and the cloth is stoned. Hiding it is really very tragic. He must report it every week. Hide your leave from work to the hotel where Robert is staying. Sally couldn't get in touch with a hidden party to his house. Last time she hid the eggs tomorrow, she kept the lock on the room. So she opened the door to the house. There was no one in the house who was both dirty and messy, and suddenly the wild cat ran into the house again. Sally conveniently picked up the penalty card to chase the cat out. Sally was kind enough to clean the house for Hyde when she suddenly saw the transmission line she had given to Hyde lying in the trash. Sally turned the notebook with a broken heart when the phone number learned the address of Joe's mother's house. Sally was worried about Joe, so she went to his mother's house. Joe didn't tell his mother that he was a janitor in the police, but lied about being a car salesman. Sally didn't understand why Joe was lying. When she remembered Joe's unusual expressions recently, she was even more suspicious. On the other hand, Joe threatens the hotel waiter to get a general card, opening all the rooms. This time, he didn't kill people, just let the staff stop. Joe used Robert's room opening card and then compared the kitchen leather to the whistle knife that stalked Robert's fingerprints. Joe put the fingerprint whistle knife in a paper bag, then put the knife without fingerprints in a plastic bag. Then he left the room and went to the hotel staff. He stuffed some money into the employee's hand to compensate, then put the knife in her hand to cut the glare wire herself. Hotel staff, to keep their lives, will not report to the police. Joe pressed while cleaning and stole Robert's personal phone number. By the way, it can be heard that Stephen for catching Christoph Caver has suspended a reward of 25 million New Zealand dollars. The cops discuss if they catch Christopher Caver, how they will split the bounty. Joe felt that these egotistical cops were ridiculous. If he confessed, the money would belong to him. Joe texted Robert, the disabled man, "You killed Daniela, right? Give me 5 minutes to reply to the message, or I'll call the police." Then hid on the side, observing Robert's reaction. If Robert was innocent, he would give the message to his co-workers. But he didn't do that, and he was so worried that he couldn't sit still. But that was enough to prove that Robert was the imitator. Robert was also a smart person, and he immediately guessed that the person who sent him the message was Joe. He went into the tool room and closed the door. Joe sensed something was happening and immediately threw his phone into the bucket of water. Robert didn't say anything and pressed Joe against the wall and looked for the phone on him. "But I searched everywhere and couldn't find the phone." Robert searched for a long time and still couldn't find it. Joe said that he had never used a mobile phone before, only a desk phone. Robert didn't believe that he called back the number he had just messaged. The phone that was soaked in water would naturally not ring. Robert could only leave. Melissa couldn't call Joe, and Joe told her that the phone was in the water and couldn't be used anymore. Melissa said that leaving the phone in the rice jar could suck out all the water. After knowing that he was dealing with Robert, Joe threw the phone into the bucket of water. So Melissa was no longer in love with him. The two thought that Robert would go to the motel where he worked to find a manager. The manager of the motel is a money-hungry person who says that he will probably give them up. They can't leave the manager alone. When he got home, Joe followed Melissa's words and put his phone in the jar of rice. At this time, Joe's mother called, and his mother also knew how to play. The guard of the old man who had previously bathed together fell and was admitted to the hospital. To express her apology, she said that someone had come to our house to look for Joe. Joe thought it was Melissa, but she didn't know anything. Joe didn't notice either. He went to the door of the motel and barged inside. The manager's goldfish was very beautiful, and he immediately intended to stay. Melissa let the manager fall to the ground. The two of them let the other party go. Then Joe took out the knife without fingerprints. Melissa sat silently and watched Joe stab the manager to death. The manager's cry of distress sounded wonderful. Joe put the weapon in a plastic bag and then took out the knife with Robert's fingerprint. He took the manager's bloody knife and then put it in a paper bag. Finally, the two of them brought the goldfish home excitedly. Melissa knew that Joe was going to exchange the charge of killing the manager for Robert and was very happy. Unexpectedly, Joe was so smart. She immediately fell in love with Joe. Joe finds a trash can and throws the knife with his fingerprints into it. The oath to find traffic violations at home is the death penalty he used to kill the car he used earlier. Now take it to the right place and all the jokes will be deeply intertwined. The phone is fun and the rice can really be used. Joe texted Robert to transfer $50,000 tomorrow, or he'll call the police. Then turn off the power and go to sleep. Tonight is really a beautiful night. The very next day, the police discussed the death of the motel manager. Joe sent a message to Robert again to ask if the money had been transferred. Then turn off the power and throw it in the trash. Seeing the message in Robert's head was extremely chaotic, but he didn't know who messaged it. He hasn't been able to vent his anger on Joe. Colleagues all suddenly looked at Robert impatiently and out of control. Arriving at the tool room, Joe came to send Robert something more threatening. Sally walked in, making him afraid that the phone would fall to the ground. Sally wondered if Robert didn't use the phone. Joe only lied today to buy. Sally saw that Joe was not normal today and bullied him. She talked about him, she went to his mother's house, and said that she was going to the hospital to be a nurse. Joe was overjoyed to finally be able to get rid of Sally. But Sally felt that Joe was really unusual. Sally began to secretly spy on Joe. You have to remember, people, don't be too curious. Sally did not know that her curiosity would lead her to a godslayer. Joe went to Daniela's house and sent a message to Robert. Within 30 minutes of the day, bring the cash to Daniela's house. Half an hour later, Robert arrived at Daniela's house. Sally in the distance also saw this scene. Robert had just entered the house and was eating a pan in the middle of his face. In Robert's pocket was not money but hammers and murder tools. It seems that Robert and Joe have the same way of killing. A pan that wasn't strong enough just now quickly woke up and fought with Joe. Outside, Sally didn't know what Joe was involved in. She used the car to enter the house to advise Joe. In the house, the two people fought very badly, biting their hands and gouging their eyes, playing everything. After all, Joe loves chili peppers and can't fight the police. He was pressed to the ground by Robert, punching him repeatedly in the face. Outside, Sally had reached the door. Only the rope was left, and Joe would be strangled to death. Sally raised her hand to the corner of the door, but at this moment her phone rang. Joe was dying, and he lifted a cup and slammed it on Robert's head. The cup shattered, and Robert fell. Sally's father suddenly fell ill and was hospitalized. She had no mind and didn't care what happened in the house. So he left with the gold. Joe dragged Robert upstairs and shoved him into a chair. He inserted the traffic violation ticket into Robert's hand so that his fingerprints would stick to it. Then he used duct tape to separate Robert's mouth and began an important plan. Underground star Joe at the public phone booth called the police. He denounced that he found a knife stained with blood in the trash can. It is very likely that it is a murderous retirement. When Joe came home, he was afraid that the police would work just in time to meet the half-believing Stroud. The first step of the plan was successful. Naturally, when no one was in Robert's locker, he put the ticket inside. It doesn't matter if the words of a suspect are correct or not. It doesn't matter if the writing bites on the ship or not. The most important thing is that the car fell closely, but that was enough to prove that Robert had killed people a long time ago. Stroud went to the trash can and found the knife stained with blood. The police were unable to contact Robert. The autopsy department said the fingerprints on the knife belonged to Robert. The police opened Robert's locker and checked it and found the penalty card in his pocket. Based on the penalty card, they quickly found the car. Opening the car cup inside, there was a garbage that had rotted for a long time. It turns out that Robert is the borderline murderer Christopher. The flood police searched the house, and the hotel where Robert was staying could not find him. He must have heard the commotion, so he ran away. Joe and Melissa returned to Daniela's house. Robert was already very weak after a day and a night when Robert heard that Joe was Christopher. The person who was pursued by the police for 2 years still did not catch him. He was extremely shocked. No one expected the tearful killer to hide right under the eyes of the police. When threatened by 2 people, Robert told the truth. He was indeed the one who simulated Daniela's early season for Joe. This is a bloody love story. At a party, Robert gets to know Daniela and his wife. He just looked at it and realized that Daniela was unhappy. During the conversation, he learned that she was abused by his wife, and Robert was also abused by his wife at home. The 2 people in the same situation began to go back and forth together. This house is also where they date. Needless to say, Daniela was acquainted with another man in the art of Robert. So she played the flag of the fox Robert to force him to break up. The more the 2 argued, the more fierce Robert finally lost control. Daniela stabbed Robert with a ballpoint pen. In a fit of rage, he strangled Daniela to death. To get away with the crime, Robert left an apple with the dead police blaming Joe. When he arrived at the scene of the investigation, he remembered that his ballpoint pen had blood on it. It is recommended to use the pen you bring with you in exchange for evidence. After hearing this, Joe felt contemptuous. After killing people, he still felt regret. Robert is not an expensive perpetrator. Melissa also said that the reason for making her a crazy person is what she is now. Her sister, Melissa, was assaulted and killed by a police officer a few years ago. The policeman was also in the same unit as Robert. Although the whole school is clear, they cover each other. The police department repaired the residence so that the other policeman was innocent. But the strange thing is that after a period of time, the policeman suddenly disappeared. Seeing Melissa smile, Robert suddenly understood that Melissa had killed the policeman to avenge his sister. He was her first scent. From then on, she went around hunting the beast-faced policeman and gradually turned into a witch. At this time, Joe also understood. At that time, Melissa thought he was a beast-faced policeman. After looking at the papers, he found out that he was just a janitor, and he was spared. She stubbornly found the imitator because she wanted to punish this kind of policeman. Joe was very polite to give it to Melissa. Robert had his throat cut off, and Melissa licked the fresh blood on her hand, smiling with satisfaction. Joe set fire to the house and dragged Robert's body back to the suburbs. He washed Robert's body like this so that the police wouldn't find him anymore, and he was afraid of running away on behalf of Robert. But Joe didn't know that Sally had caused him trouble. The police found Robert's fingerprints on the ticket and also found Sally's fingerprints. Because when she was at Joe's house, Sally picked up this card to chase away cats. Joe demanded to understand Sally that she was not Robert's accomplice. But why was there her fingerprint on it? Sally remembered that day Robert met Joe, and she remembered that she had used this card to chase cats. Sally's heart broke down in tears. Joe didn't know anything. He was going to the park to meet Melissa at the moment. When they first met, the 2 suddenly felt like they had fallen in love with each other for a long time. These 2 perverted murderers are also equally far apart, so they attract each other. One person always carries a gun in case someone returns to the enemy's killing process to intimidate. It is also a kind of romance like abandonment, always going with feces. That is, the 2 lived happily together. Other loving couples watch the moon and starry together. The 2 of them are watching beautiful girls choose targets. Others live in sweetness, and they live in tamarind. Just when Joe thinks he doesn't have to worry anymore, Sally suddenly comes looking for him. This stupid girl hid Joe's story from the police. Sally advised Joe to confess. When they learned everything, Joe was stunned, but the 2 didn't know that the police were always watching Sally. Seeing the 2 arguing, Straddle immediately ordered the police to surround them. In a moment of panic, Joe's crime tool fell all over the ground. He quickly picked up the gun and took Sally hostage, who was about to try to struggle. But the police surrounded him. Joe saw Melissa in the distance, and the 2 looked at each other and immediately understood what they meant. Joe pushed Sally out and pointed the gun at his head. Melissa nodded gently, as if agreeing with his thoughts. In anticipation of everyone's surprised gazes, Joe pulled the trigger. The bullet did not hit the weak spot. Joe was only slightly injured. Do you think that Joe did it because he didn't want to involve Melissa? Do you think this is the power of love? Do you think this is a romance? This was just the plan of the two of them. In New Zealand, there is no death penalty. Moreover, the conditions in the feud are very good. So, what will Melissa do outside? Season 2 will probably bring even more interesting episodes. I'm going to look for you, Joe. Above is the entire content of the Dark City movie, The Cleaner. Did you see this movie? On a score of 10, how many points do you rate the film? Please send us an answer below the comment section. Thank you for your interest. Hello, and see you soon.